Well, hello and welcome to this workshop on experiential learning and prior learning assessment. My name is Gail Wallace, and together during this session of your course on adult development and learning, I'm going to be talking to you about a unique process in which you can be documenting the adult learning that you've had since high school and also use that as a way to earn academic credit for your life experience. So in a nutshell, we're just going to try to answer this question. What have you learned since high school? Now, for some of us, it's been a longer time since we were in high school than others. But I'm guessing that if you would think back through your experience since that time, you have learned a few things, whether or not you've been in a college classroom. Probably just as much outside the classroom as inside the classroom. And so what we're going to be doing in this class, Adult Development and Learning, as part of the process of looking at how you learn as an individual, you're going to be putting together a notebook that documents some of that learning since high school. And in that notebook, you're going to be putting 3 different kinds of things. We'll have copies of the transcripts, and you'll be looking at coursework that you've taken that might apply to something that you want to do in the future. So it's a way of documenting. Here's kind of the background that I've been moving towards the school, the things that I've done so far in the classroom. And then the second thing that you're going to have in here is any professional technical training that you've had, on-the-job training that would apply to maybe something you want to do with your career, although it wasn't in a traditional classroom. And then the third thing that's going to be in here is your experiential learning essays. And these are ways of documenting college-level learning that happened outside of some kind of formal classroom setting, whether it was in a college classroom or in the workplace. So the purpose of this workshop is to give you some really practical information about how to do that portfolio notebook, because that's a significant part of the grade for this course. But more than that, it's a way of helping you get in one place all of your prior learning so that you'll be able to see if there's anything there that you might be able to use for college credit. And we put this workshop in this course because we know a few things about adult learning that make this a really good fit. We know that adults learn continuously. So even if you haven't been in college continuously, or some of us, it seems like we have, but we know that you've been learning anyway. We also know that adult learning is tied to adult development, so it makes sense to have this, to look at these 2 subjects at the same time. And we know that adults can learn from experience. We don't always, do we? Sometimes something has to happen to us 5 or 6 times before we go, okay, I get it now. But we do learn from experience if it's reflected on. So part of the process of putting together this notebook is to just encourage you in that reflection process. Okay. Let's talk for just a couple of minutes about what prior learning assessment is, because I'm guessing that you probably haven't heard that term before. Basically, it's the evaluation of learning that took place outside of the traditional classroom setting for the purpose of awarding college credit. So basically what we're saying is that we believe that your experience and the learning from that experience is worth college credit. And we have come up with some ways to document that. And this is kind of a subfield within the larger field of adult education. It's not just something that APU has made up or come up with on our own. It's rooted historically to World War II veterans who wanted recognition for their military training when they got back from the service. And so as increasing numbers of veterans and other adults went back to school, colleges started saying, this is maybe something we need to think about. What is the value of the experience, the life experience that these students have brought back with them to the classroom? And various professional organizations make sure that we have established principles in the field so that we're kind of doing the same thing across the nation as far as our standards for awarding credit. So this is a nationally and internationally accredited process to help you accelerate your degree program. Okay, let's talk for a minute then about what kind of learning these kinds of students would have had to bring to the classroom. So what kind of experience can equate to learning at the college level? What we're going to be looking for is your work experience, obviously. And that makes sense if you've been working in the field of business for 10 years and now you're going back to school to finish a business degree. There are a lot of good reasons why you shouldn't have to write an introduction to business or take an introduction to business class. You might be able to write an essay about that if you've had some experience, or you might be able to document your work experience in such a way that you would be able to get out of having to take a class like that. So that's one way. Another thing is social roles. Undergraduate students typically take classes like Intro to Psychology or Intro to Sociology, but if you have been married for 15 years or you are a parent of 3 children, there are probably some psychological concepts that you have learned on your own that we could probably give you credit for in the area of psychology. A lot of adults learn through independent reading and study and have become experts on their own, so that's another area that we can look at. And of course, any formal training that you've had in your work setting. So computer classes, especially leadership training, all these kinds of things. And this learning can be either sponsored learning, so it's actually documented, like at work. If you work for HP or a large corporation like that, you can actually, I know, go online and just get your transcript of all the professional training that you've had. So we can look at things like that. But it could be non-sponsored learning. I mean, no organization said, come to this workshop or this class and we're going to teach you how to do something. It's something you said, I'm going to learn this on my own and in my own way. And now, of course, there are lots of useful and knowledgeable things that you have learned through your life experience. But academic credit can only be awarded for learning that relates to college coursework. So just kind of a humorous example, we have had students submit things like pet CPR and even an essay on owning a dog, which are great learning experiences, but you probably wouldn't go out and take a class in that, a college class. So we need to just keep that in mind as you're thinking about what kind of experience what I want to put in my notebook. And remember that it will be a faculty member in that particular field that will be looking at your prior learning and evaluating that for credit. All right, let's just talk about a little bit about the philosophical basis for giving credit for prior learning and experiential learning. And the philosophical basis, it comes from David Kolb's learning model. And what David Kolb did, working backwards kind of from David Kolb, you start with John Dewey, who did a lot of research and writing about education. Kolb looked at his ideas and said, I think basically from this material, I see that there are 4 processes of learning that are particular to adult students. He said, first, an adult has a concrete experience in which they're actually out there doing something. And then through the process of reflection, they're looking back on that experience and trying to figure out what they can take away from that. And those become the abstract conceptualization, which is basically the principles, just kind of general principles that might apply in another situation, and then they can test that out through active experimentation in another setting. So these 4 processes are kind of make up how we evaluate prior learning. And you'll be writing about these 4 processes. If you had professional training, we'll ask you to complete a statement of learning outcomes where you answer just some brief questions on these 4 areas. And if you write an essay, you'll be doing an essay based on the 4 sections of this model. So we'll talk a little bit about that model and how that works when we do the essay process. I've said a lot about essays, so I thought I might just give you a couple ideas about what kinds of things people write about. Here's some sample essay topics: starting a new business, teaching preschoolers, effective sales techniques, parenting teenagers, working with special needs children. So these are all topics that could be evaluated for college credit. And as I mentioned, prior learning assessment at APU is documented through completion of a portfolio notebook. And it's going to document your professional technical training and your experiential learning. This portfolio notebook really is a summary of your lifelong learning since high school. And it can track your professional development, it can serve as an interview tool, it can be a source of academic credit. So what goes into a prior learning portfolio? You have received a portfolio handbook, and that gives you information specific to each section, so I'm just going to go through them briefly. And I did bring a sample to show you. It's basically just a 3-ring binder. This is a large one. You could use a smaller one depends on how much professional and technical training you have to go into your notebook. But basically it'll have a cover page, it has some identifying information on the spine. This is all in your portfolio handbook. And then it's got some title pages, a table of contents, and some dividers so that we can clearly see what's in each section. And then you'll notice that each page is in these protective sleeves, or each section should be in a protective sleeve. So that's kind of the logistics of what it looks like. And inside of here, the 5 sections are your autobiography, which I think most of you have probably already written. And then your transcripts, and this is copies of your transcripts. And traditionally we've said put all of your transcripts in here, but students have said, you know, I really don't want to put all of my transcripts. I'd like to put transcripts that kind of demonstrate or show what classes I've taken that might be useful for the career that I'm trying to go for. So you can be selective with the transcripts that you put in there. And any military documents go in there as well. And then section 3 is the resume that I think you've also already written. Then section 4 is your professional technical work, and section 5 is your essays. Okay. So we're going to really just be focusing on those two sections. If you have your handbooks with you, you could turn, if you'd like, to section 4 and look at that as I'm talking and just see where some of this information is. Okay. So in section 4 of your handbook, you have all this information about the binder, the table of contents, the title pages, the plastic sleeves, okay, all those details, so you don't need to write them down. Okay, so section 4 is where you're going to be documenting your professional and technical coursework. Okay. Here's the layout for section 4. You're going to have a title page and a summary table. And in that summary table, you're going to be just listing out all the courses that you're putting into this section. So for example, if I have a lot of computer training, I might put, you know, Microsoft Word, and then Microsoft Excel. Maybe you've had some Lotus, some things like that. So you could just list the courses by name, just make a little table in Word. And then behind that, I'm going to have statement of learning outcomes for these courses, and you'll have a better idea of what that is after we're done with the workshop. And then you're going to put the actual documentation, things showing the courses that you took. So hopefully you have a certificate, or sometimes students submit a letter from a supervisor, or sometimes it's a course outline, something like that, anything that documents the training that you've had. Okay, this training should also be, I need to just remind you, this is adult learning. So sometimes we get students that submit ROP training that they took in high school, and we can't accept that for credit. So it does need to be anything that you've taken as an adult outside of high school. It also can include volunteer work or teaching. For those kinds of experiences, you would write an experiential learning essay. It needs to be some kind of situation you are actually the student, you are the learner, actually kind of sitting in a classroom of some type, even if it's an informal classroom. Okay, let's talk for a minute about what kind of things you could include in this section. Let's talk about sponsored learning, because that's really what this section is all about. You're going to be putting in there any coursework from non-accredited schools. Can you think of some examples of non-accredited schools that, has anyone gone to anything? Yes?
ITT.
Okay, ITT, so any of those computer or technical kind of places. Anything else? Yes?
Medical vocational schools.
Medical vocational schools, good. So also business schools. A lot of times there are Bible schools that are non-accredited, so we can't take those units. Can't take any of those units in through the traditional registrar. But because you're adult students in a degree completion program, through our office we can take up to 30 units of those as professional technical credit. So you may want it in there because you need the credit. You may also just want it in there to document how well-rounded you are as a student and as a person and as an employee. You can also have in there any formal training, as I've already mentioned, that you received in a professional setting. It could also include military training. It can include training taken through other organizations. For example, if you are a volunteer coach, sometimes there's training that's required, workshops that you go to for coaching. If you're a PTA volunteer, you can go to national conferences. Can you think of anything else? An organization you might have received training that you're wondering about? Yes?
I have a question. I work for a company that, even though we're sales reps, they made us go through training on all the process of payroll.
Exactly. Anything, so she's asking about training on the job related to sales. So that would definitely be, sometimes they'll send you to an outside organization that provides training. That would definitely fit this category. Yes?
I do fundraising, so I go to a lot of national fundraising organizations.
Good. Yes.
So that would count.
Fundraising training through organizations taken outside of your work setting. Yes?
If you're taking the certificate, like accounting certificate in college, is it?
Yes, accounting certificates, any certificate work, like sometimes nursing programs are just certificate and not degree programs as well, those, or cosmetology. That kind of takes us down to this licenses, insurance, real estate. a pilot license, cosmetology. We're not giving you credit for the actual license, but for the training that was required to get that license. This is a really great way that we can accelerate your degree, as well as help you reflect on the kind of learning that you've had outside the classroom. So those are kinds of things that will be in this section. You're also going to, because we're documenting your learning, not just your experience, you're going to be completing a statement of learning outcomes, we call that a solo form, and putting that with the training. Now, if you've taken 6 computer classes, you don't have to complete a statement of learning outcomes for each class. You can put them all on one form. Okay. And there's an example of that in your portfolio notebook, and you should have received a CD of forms that has that on there as well. Okay. This is just a little bit what's on that statement of learning outcomes. It's going to ask you to briefly describe the training and 3 or 4 concepts that you learned. That kind of equates to that concrete experience on the Kolb model. And then reflect, that would be that section experience, reflect on the value of the learning. And then we're going to ask you to tell how you would apply the learning in another setting. And it can just be a brief paragraph for each of the trainings that's in there. And here's a question I usually get asked: what if I don't have any training? Then you can just put a title page that says no items to submit. Because sometimes you haven't had the opportunity. Also, another thing I want to mention in this section is you don't have to put every single thing you've ever done. If you have a lot of training, I don't want you to be spending hours and hours compiling it for the purpose of this notebook unless you need a lot of elective units. If you don't need a lot of elective units, what I would do if I were you is just put in this section things that I think would make me more marketable, that I might want to be able to say to an employer when I went to an interview, yeah, I've done this college program, I've had other college coursework, but I've also had training in these things. So you want to kind of look at that degree audit sheet that you receive from the registrar's office, say what do I need and what would benefit me if I had it in this section. Okay, section 5 of your portfolio notebook is going to be the part where you're putting in the essays that you've written for this class. So it's demonstrating adult learning through the essay process. Okay. So if you want to look at this section in your portfolio, it would be handbook section 5. Okay. And let's talk for a minute about why we're making you go through this exercise of writing an essay. The idea is that we're demonstrating your experiential learning through these 4 processes. So what we're doing is we're wanting to document in a very basic and general way the experience that you've had as an adult. We want to be able to look at everyone's experience kind of on equal ground, an equal playing field. So we ask you to do it in a specific format that makes it really easy for us to review. So section 1, you're going to be describing the experience that you had. In section 2, we're going to ask you to make observations about the experience and to reflect on it, because you remember we said that we know adults only learn from experience when it's reflected on. And in section 3, we're going to ask you to come up, like kind of distill or extract from that experience some general principles, and we call them abstract concepts, theories, principles, things that you've learned from that experience that you can support with references. So for example, if I write an essay about starting my own small business, I might have learned things about hiring or firing. I might have learned about writing a marketing plan or writing a business plan. I might have learned about advertising, delegation, just some business concepts. So the concepts that you want to pull out are things that would be reflected in the business literature. So you might have learned a lot of other things. You might have learned things that wouldn't be found in a business textbook that are valid learning, but for the purpose of this assignment, try to stick to learning that's really connected to the topic that you're writing about. And then in section 4, you're going to be asked to apply that in a new setting. So I might be able to take my small business experience if I had a home-based business. I might be able to take those into a managerial role in a larger company and make those apply in that setting as well. So what an evaluator is looking for, what your instructor is looking for, is show me what you learned. And show me in a way that I can see that it's broad enough and deep enough to give you college credit for. Okay. Okay, so you have in section 4 your professional technical credit, and now you've got in section 5 the essays that you've written for this class. And you'll be turning that portfolio notebook in for a grade for this course in adult development and learning. But you can also receive units through that portfolio notebook. Okay. As I mentioned before, I think up to 30 hours can be processed as professional technical coursework or as experiential learning essays. That's 30 units. An hour and a unit is the same thing. Professional technical units are $30 a unit, so it's an economical way to get more credits and more units. How are you going to know if you need this? You're going to look at that little box on the right-hand side of that degree audit sheet that you received from the registrar. Okay. You need 126 units to get a college degree from APU, or most places require anywhere from 120 to 130, 140 units. So for us, it's 126 units. So if you look at that degree audit sheet, and you may remember that you needed 60 units to get into our programs, at least 60 units. A lot of you had more than 60 units. Some of you had less, and we had to do a little playing with professional and technical coursework already, so you may be familiar with this process already. You're going to be getting 39 units for the program curriculum that you're doing in the organizational leadership program. So that's a total of 99 units. So everyone should have 99 units to start with, but that's not 126 units. So that's going to mean that you're going to need some remaining units. It's going to be different for every single one of you because some of you came in with more credits or more units than others. So we look at a little box that will tell you what general ed units you need and what elective units you need. I want to make sure that you understand this because it seems like every year around graduation time we get phone calls in our office saying, I thought I just had to complete my program. I didn't know that I needed additional units. So make sure that you know now so that you can plan, because you may want to take advantage of the professional technical credit. You may want to write essays, or you may need to actually go and take some more courses, maybe at a community college or some online courses or correspondence courses to be able to get those 126 units. Okay, does everybody understand that? Yes?
Did I hear you correctly earlier when you said that we can have a maximum of 70 transfer units from community college?
Yes, you can only have 70 units maximum from a community college. That's because you're earning a 4-year college degree, and those units are considered lower level college credits, like the freshman, sophomore credits. And so the balance of your units need to be junior, senior level courses. So you can only have 70 units at the lower level. Yes?
Is it possible that during the...
Yes, he's asking is it possible the class was missed when your transcripts were evaluated? It's possible. So if you think that we missed a course, you can always call the registrar's office, and Sherry Harris is the representative for the registrar's office for the even-numbered cohorts, and Pauline Reyes for the odd-numbered cohorts. So you could give one of them a call and just say, would you just check on this transcript? And sometimes they can't take it because it's not considered Cal State transferable. There's all those kinds of qualifiers for the traditional registrar's office. A lot of times classes that they can't take in, Stephanie and I can take in through the Office of Assessment though. For example, the computer courses or business courses, fire science, just some things that APU may not be able to take through the traditional registrar could come in through us. So another thing that you can do is to email me, or if you were in an odd-numbered group, you would email Stephanie, and you would just say, could you please review my transcripts for professional technical credit? This is especially helpful if you have like an ITT transcript where you have a lot of units that they couldn't take all of them. So that's a good way to get the remaining units too. So the question relates to GE, general elective units. Those are a lot harder to get through the portfolio. The portfolio is more suited towards elective units because we're looking at life experience. So I could give you an example though of the science lab. I recently had a policeman receive his science lab credit for forensic science that he was required, special training that he was required to do. And we also had a fitness instructor receive it for a biophysical lab that he did with his athletes. So there are ways to get it, but it is a little bit harder. General literature credit can be earned through writing an experiential learning essay, but that would mean that you have had to have the experience of reading a lot of literature. So you'd need to write about 6 or 8 classic works of literature and be able to really talk about the themes and character development and plot devices and all those kinds of things. So if you have really done a lot of research in that area, then you could write about it. But for most general education courses, it's easier to probably take a course. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about where these units might come from. So as we just talked about, you can earn community college units or bring in 70 community college units. You could bring in an unlimited number of courses from other universities or four-year colleges. You can test out of units. Are you familiar with the CLEP test process? Okay. The question on foreign language, what I would say another option for foreign language credit is to CLEP out of the language. So these are tests that are provided on a national basis online. You go to the collegeboard.com website and there'll be a whole listing of tests. You can take your literature, composition, you can do some business courses, and foreign language. They just have probably, I see she has the brochure right there, probably 30 different tests. And they have study guides for those tests. You take the test online, they tell you immediately what your score is, and usually a score of 50 will earn you about 3 semester units. Okay. So that's another way that you can bring in units. And then correspondence, you can have up to 9 correspondence units, but you can't have them in your last, they have to be completed before your last quarter. These 30 units can come through any combination of professional technical credit or essays. So an essay usually gets 3 units of credit, so you could write 10 essays. I think the most we've ever had students write is 7. I think that's the limit though, 7 essays. But it has been done, and it is a good way if you like to write and you have a lot of varied experiences. It's a really good way to earn credit. Okay, when you finish doing your portfolio and you've turned it in to Dr. Underwood and you've received a grade, or it's in the process of being graded, then you can decide to maybe what you want to submit for credit. So it's kind of a separate process. You'll be turning in that notebook to her, and then when you get it back, go through that notebook and say, what do I want to submit to the Office of Assessment? And you'll be taking out, just take out those, or you can email. The best way is emailing essays directly to the office, sending or faxing pro-text in, or sending it through the brown pouch that you have in your class each week. So once you get this, I really want you to focus on getting the notebook done and not so much on the credit as you get through these next few weeks of class. But once you've finished that, there are specific processes outlined in your portfolio handbook for submitting for credit, or you can always email me if you're not sure on how to do that. Once we get that in our office, the first thing we're going to be looking at is it a college level subject? And then we'll be looking at how many units you can get. For professional technical training, we evaluate 30 to 60 hours as being roughly equivalent to a unit. And it all depends on how hard the training was, kind of the rigor and the breadth and the depth of the training that you had. So the more documentation you give us, the easier it is for us to evaluate how many units it's going to be. So if you send me just a little blurb about this course you took, I might say I need more information. Is there a website? Can you give me a course brochure? Or sometimes if it's a national organization, I just will directly go myself to the website and look at the coursework that you took. And sometimes I even will call the school or the organization and ask about how many hours it was. And if there was required attendance and all those fun little things that we need to know. If it's an essay that we're getting into the office, we're going to be asking some similar questions, but we're first going to want to make sure that it's your personal adult experience, that it's a college level subject, that the essay has those 3 concepts or principles, and it's supported with references, and it's written according to the handbook requirements. Because as I mentioned, we try to keep this like a level playing field for all students to document life experience through the essay process. So there really are some rigid requirements for how the essay is to be written. Can I write an essay for GE? Okay. This is a question that we already addressed from one of you as a student, but there is a section in your handbook that you can turn to in the back, an appendix on writing essays for GE credit, and it gives you guidelines for each area that you can do that for. It includes literature, speech, composition, Bible. I think those are the primary categories you can write an essay for. Okay, and when we get the essay and we've decided, okay, this is an essay that meets the Kolb model and it's about an adult personal life experience, it's a college level subject, then we send it out to a faculty evaluator. So if you're writing about business, we'll send it to a business evaluator. If you're writing about marriage, parenting, we'll send it to a psychology evaluator. If you're writing about maybe a cross-cultural experience, we'll send it to sociology. So wherever the appropriate subject content is, we'll send it to that school. And that evaluator has 4 weeks to look at your essay and evaluate it for credit. And they'll send it back to us with either full credit, which would be 3 units, partial credit, no credit, or very commonly it will be returned for revisions. What that usually means is one of your sections didn't quite meet their expectations, or maybe they didn't like your reference list, maybe one of your concepts they'd like you to change a little bit, maybe they didn't feel like you gave enough details about your experience. So they'll send it back, ask you to make those changes, and you'll have one opportunity to rewrite it. Okay? And I would say 90% of the time when students rewrite, they get credit for that essay. And how will you know if you received credit? Once that essay comes back to us, or once your pro-text submission's been evaluated, we will send you a memo. That has been done traditionally through the brown pouch in your class, but now we're starting to do that online. So I really encourage you, if you're not already using your APU email, remember that's how we're going to be sending all of the information, all of our correspondence. Any information we need to send out to you is going to come through that APU email address. So that's how you'll find out about your credit award. The Professional Technical Credit Award you'll probably hear about within 2 to 4 weeks, but the essay process can take up to 12 weeks, especially if revisions are needed. So we encourage you to do essays early and not wait till the last module. Here's one little thing that you can do at home. We won't take the time to do it in class right now, but just kind of figure out a plan for your outstanding units. You can just put some sections on a piece of paper. Traditional coursework, Kolb essays, professional technical credit, and exams, and then just kind of say, okay, I need 12 units, and here's the kind of units they are. Where do I think these would fit, and how can I plan for those units? And then if you have any questions about that, you can always email Stephanie or myself and say, here's my plan, what do you think? We'll say, yeah, this topic would work, or this kind of training, here's what you would need to do to take the next step. So we're happy to do that. Here's some contact information. As I mentioned, the representative for odd-numbered cohorts is Stephanie Fenwick, and then Gail Wallace. I'm the representative for your even-numbered cohorts. And I have a business card, and email is probably the best way to get a hold of either one of us, so I'll pass out a business card at the break. But my email is gwallace@apu.edu. So, okay. And that concludes the first portion of this, where you put together your notebook, and we're going to take a dinner break now, and then when we come back we'll talk about how to write the essays. Okay?
You could have the last